questions?
One thing that was on my mind recently, I was contemplating what was important for me, and just reflecting on what's been important in the past, and what's important for other people and for society and things like that. And our society kind of, the importance is put on like money and like success in the business world and things like that. Or pleasure is another big one that drives status. And then I was reflecting on myself, and pleasure has been a big one in the past, and success in work and relationships. But then recently, those ones are never ending. They're like insatiable. And then which leads you to wanting something more, which often leads to Dharma, and something so on my mind recently has been like this idea of perfection, and I think it applies to Dharma because waking up is kind of like achieving, or like the idea of enlightenment is kind of like the idea of perfection in a way, right?
Yeah. It's discovering perception.
What's that?
It's discovering perfection. I said perception, I meant perfection. It's perceiving perfection.
So yeah, my first...
But it's really beyond perfection, because perfection implies, as I say it now, I realize it implies a comparison to something else. It's beyond perfection or lack of perfection. It's so, and the other thing you may be looking for is something that lasts, right? Pleasure doesn't last. Status doesn't last. Health doesn't last. Youth doesn't last. Status doesn't last. So you may be getting wiser and looking for something durable in your life, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's different levels to it. On one level in the world, it's like in art, there's just so many people who are fine with the mediocre, and there's so little true artists that are after perfection. And
that's true, and it's always been true. So you can't go by what's popular, right? Because this pursuit, this endeavor, has never really been popular in the sense, that we're talking about it. But let me just throw this in case people are just happen to be listening. You're not really pursuing anything, and you're really not trying to get anything. What you're trying to do is clear away the druck, the dross, and the irrelevant, to find the foundational. Oh, here's the word. It's so hard to find a word. Being of the awareness that is our foundation. Or, you could say consciousness, you could say awareness, or you could dispose of both those words and just talk about, there's no way to talk about it, but it's like underneath everything, and it makes everything possible, but it's well beyond our notions of perfect or imperfect or good or bad or even yes or no. It's beyond those, and I think as much of a scientific question now as it is a philosophical one. But the only people that ever get any traction are the, forgive my language, but the mystics, right? The ones who set out to discover it on their own. That's the only way it can be discovered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this. Everybody's looking for not everybody, but some people are looking for the foundational fabric of reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not numbers or anything that numbers can represent. And it's beneath even perception, although it enables perception. And so it's there for anyone that is sincere in looking for it. And it's been called many things. Jesus calls it God, his Father, right?
Mm.
The Hindus call it Atman. The Buddhists don't really call it much, except to say that, they may call it the Buddha verse or something like that. The Taoists call it the mother of the way, I guess, or something like that. So we know this from centuries of human effort human endeavor. But it's like it has to be rediscovered every century or so and reformulated so people can know that it's there and there's a way to find it or a way to discover it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's being itself. See, nothing on this earth, if you think about it, okay, we can speed up time or we can slow down time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's speed up time for now and look at the earth, and you'll see nothing on the earth lasts for more than a second.
Mm-hmm.
But this does. It lasts forever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everything here that we look at, the trees, the sky, the animals, the plants and all that there, and even us, we're just mayflies. And we emerge from this foundation of being and we return to it. It's very obvious. It's the source of everything. And its nature is beyond benevolent. It's like beyond even human love. It's like something indescribable, I guess, is a correct way to put it. But so yeah, if you're looking for something worthy of a human lifetime, it's to find your own soul, to find your own real parent, where you come from and where you're going.
Mm.
Otherwise, I don't want to sound harsh, so I'll quote somebody else, but it's basically like wasting a human lifetime not to do this. Because nothing compares remotely. And we can do it. So
what does it mean to be beyond like human love?
well, see, we imagine with our little primate brains and our two eyeballs and our two ears and our noses that we have, some kind of authority to talk about reality. But we can't do that. We can only talk about the tiniest little sliver. Are you familiar with the Ruliad of Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram's Ruliad? It's basically the sphere of all possible mathematics.
Okay.
And we could talk about that, or we could talk about a universe in which there were, this. I'm just talking. I'm not proposing this is true, but a universe where there were more dimensions than just the three dimensions of space and the dimension of time, like string theory, right?
Okay, I'm not familiar with this.
Okay, well, just a thought experiment. Imagine if there were other dimensions besides space and time.
Okay.
Now, what would give us any ability to talk about those realities?
You'd have to have some way of measuring or perceiving them.
Right, which we haven't been able to do.
Right.
Because we're basically limited to our eyes, our ears, our nose, and our brains.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have theories about this and that, but what if so humans imagine that that they're the center of the universe, the Buddhaverse, the whatever. And in a certain way, in a very mysterious way, we are, from one point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That's mainly the human point of view, by the way. But in another way, we're not particularly that. We're just one more divine creature. For the longest time, people thought that Earth was the center of the universe, and the sun rotated around it.
Yeah.
And then they thought, well, wait a minute, our galaxy is the center of the universe, at least. Our sun is the center, but no, that's not true either.
Yeah.
And neither is our galaxy. And there's no place in the universe that we could say that is the center of it, or the principal part from which the rest of the universe should be perceived. And so the ability to move out of that. Yeah, remember the practice of the network of loci?
Yeah.
That's very, very important for many reasons. One, which I'll just mention in passing, is that if you're going to try and think about a problem, say a political problem or something like that, you have to be able to see it from different vantage points.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're just going to be hopelessly biased by your own prior conditioning.
Yeah.
Now, when you're thinking about reality, you have to be able to do the same thing. You need to be able to see our, let's say you just want to go to astronomical reality. You need to be able to see our galaxy from other galaxies. You need to be able to look at the universe from more than one vantage point, or you're just hopelessly parochial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so take that principle, and it becomes obvious why reality would be beyond the human notions of good and bad, love and hate, desire and fear. It's the very basis of reality itself. It is the basis of reality. It is reality, period, out of which emerges the apparent reality of the trees and the skies and the planets and the moons and the universes. It's the substrate of being, and that being is what enables awareness. I mean, you can't have awareness without that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have consciousness without that. You can't have life without that. In fact, you can't have anything without that, because it is the mother of all things. But it's not of the same category as the objects that in this world or in our minds, in our abstract. It's not in the same category as trees and birds and bridges and lakes or ideas and concepts. It's of another category altogether, although it encompasses all of those things because it makes those things possible, at least the perception of those things possible. So it gets difficult to speak about, but you have to imagine if there was some kind of like amazing, transparent silly putty, and this silly putty was awareness itself. And out of the silly putty, all of the houses and roads and trees and birds and humans and crocodiles and everything that ever emerged, and thoughts and concepts came out of this silly putty. And then after a moment's time, say it could be a femtosecond, or it could be 100 centuries. What's the difference? It just goes right back into the silly putty where it came from. This transparent silly putty, which is awareness itself, which is being itself. Now, forgive me for that analogy, that metaphor. I'm sure I'm going to regret it, but it's a different category.
Right.
So, questions. Sorry to be confusing, but you want so much to at least point in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why in the past, the Taoists talk about the eternal Tao, or Jesus talked about God, or the Hindus talk about Atman, or the Buddhists talk about Buddha, the Buddhaverse, or Buddha consciousness, or thusness.
I guess I have a vague question, but can you talk more? And we've talked about this.
I mean, hold that question. I just want to say something about thusness. One of the ways I know I'll probably regret saying anything about it at all is that the Buddhists were reduced to just say, it is thus. It is thusness. It is suchness. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely true. And that's probably the most accurate way of putting it. This is the way it is. To say anything more is going to be wrong in one direction or another. And this, in the Old Testament, I think it is, I am that I am. Right? Even that's a bit much, but it's closer. It's just, it is that it is, I am that I am. Is about as, and in the Taoism, they just call it the eternal, mysterious, gateway of marvels and mysteries. So forgive me, what I'm doing is probably wrong, but in this modern age where we have this beautiful science, and we can entertain the possibility of not being the center of the cosmos and having more dimensions than the ones we've recognized. And we've gotten to our wits' end with our neurobiology and our neuroscience. And we've gotten to the end of our rope with our consciousness studies. We're no closer than we were 3,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, we're further away. So forgive an old man for that. Now let's go to your question.
I wanted to ask if you can explain. I've asked this, I think, in the past, but I wanted to talk about it again. Explaining how gradual enlightenment works versus Satori.
It's like taking a wall down brick by brick instead of using a grenade. You start taking down the obfuscations, as they call them, the obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually you get older, you get more mature, you get less silly, and you realize that, the pleasures that you used to have, they're just not quite doing it for you anymore. Mm-hmm. You can't just go out and get drunk on the weekends and go to work for a week and feel like everything's okay. You just get tired of it. And so gradually, bit by bit, you start discarding the things you don't need. And then you mature a bit and you realize that status games go nowhere because in the end, everybody ends up with the same status, which is dead in the ground. And you realize, or you make some money and you realize that money's not going to do it either. Right? So you start discarding these things. So you're less driven by what would be considered frivolity from this point of view. Mm-hmm. And so just bit by bit, your ego loosens up. Your ego defenses start to be discarded because you don't need them anymore. You can be more honest with yourself. Mm. And then if the conditions are correct, then gradually there's this evolution towards understanding. Now, how far that will go, I don't know. I mean, that's something that I would have to opine on. Mm. And I've seen people go very, very far, by the way.
How far?
Far enough to where they had peace for the rest of their life.
Mm. But then is going that far still not as far as Satori?
I would be biased to say that it's not the same thing.
Okay.
On the other hand, it's priceless. A life of peace, a life of joy, a life of seeing more clearly, and they do, than other people. And they themselves historically, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say anything bad about that path. And the traditional teaching is, whether you walk through a thunderstorm or you walk through a mist, if you walk long enough, you're going to get just as soaked. Mm-hmm. So I really don't know. I'm not dead yet, right? And the other people I know are not dead yet. And also, this is not something that you necessarily ask people like that. It's not something you go and ask any. You do when you're young, but it's not something that people advertise, right? Mm-hmm. Only teachers bring it up because they're in the position of teaching, but otherwise people don't advertise it. And so the question would be, why do you ask?
I guess I'm trying to clarify my understanding of it and understanding like what I'm trying. What is the goal exactly? Like what?
Well, your goal should be perfect enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't shoot any lower than that. That's why I don't. There's not one answer for all people.
Mm-hmm. But so for perfect enlightenment, is the gradual enlightenment like versus Satori, like where my understanding right now is Satori is still not perfect enlightenment, because it's like a
no, but it's see once and for all. Finally, the nature of reality. And this is where a lot of the contemporary teachers do a real disservice. They say, well, you can get a little taste of it. You can have a second here or a second there, or maybe 5 seconds or a minute of you get a little pre-taste or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's selling everybody short.
Okay.
But I mean, frankly, a lot of the people that pay to go to those things, they aren't sincere. And so it becomes more of how someone makes a living, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so you don't need to be sincere if you're going for a weekend or for a week and you're going to be rotating through different teachers, or you're going to just sit in the audience and do that for 20 years and never really seriously take the problem seriously or take yourself seriously. Mm-hmm. And most people are like that, frankly. Most people are like that. A sincere student is hard to find. And a sincere student should not sell herself or himself short.
Right.
And so it's up to something else. Now, no one who knows anything about this is going to say that, I achieved Satori, right, or I, witnessed the foundational nature of being and awareness, because there's no I there. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so it's not a personal achievement. On the contrary, it's the opposite of a personal achievement. Furthermore, I mean, you can't really put that on the side of your car and go around, go to South by Southwest and have all the girls come, want to talk to you because you're enlightened. That's not how it works. You see what I'm saying? Right. It's nothing like that. And so most people don't advertise with good reason. And the other people, they're not sincere and they make a show of it. And then, but no one's sincere should sell themselves short, but they should familiarize themselves with some of the requirements as outlined by historically. I mean, you need capacity, you need sincerity, and you need a concerted dedication. Quite a bit of it. Or you can get very, very lucky. That happens too.
Yeah.
So,
does it make sense to say that with gradual enlightenment, it still leads to a Satori?
It's the only preparation for, let's call it Satori or waking up or whatever. Let's call it, Zen enlightenment, not perfect enlightenment. Mm-hmm. See, it's confusing language because when they talk about perfect enlightenment, they're talking about the perfection of the human being, perfection of the perfection of the Sufis or the perfection of Jesus, right? That's another endeavor after waking up. Mm-hmm. And and you can go further and you can understand more and you can know more by so doing. But that's a separate issue.
Is it even worth thinking about that until you?
Not particularly. No, you should just worry about waking up.
Right. Okay.
That's all you have to worry about, because who knows what the issues will be. And frankly, that's what real teachers are for. And no one's going to want to hear this, but real teachers are for after you wake up, not before.
I was listening to Instant Zen.
Okay, good.
And there's a line where he says he says something like manifestation of non-discriminatory knowledge. You should attain this once, then we have something to talk about.
Right.
Is that what that means?
It sounds like a yes.
The teaching is for
what phrase do they use? Non-discriminatory what?
Knowledge.
Yeah, non-discriminatory knowledge. Yeah, that's another good word for it, by the way. Non-discriminatory knowledge would be Satori. It'd be waking up. It would be the first awakening.
Right.
Then there's something to really talk about. Yeah, because then you have a common, you're talking about the same thing to someone. And so I suppose a lot of the real teaching goes on in back rooms, or it doesn't go out in public. On the other hand, it's important for the general public to have some idea that something's there. Hence, these books, these beautiful Zen books, for example, or the Avatamsaka or the Tao Te Ching, or mankind has been doing this as long as there's been mankind, and speaking or writing, or maybe even before then, I don't know, but at least as long as we've been writing, and the result's always the same. But how it could be, I don't know. The manifestation may be different because of the epoch. And we're in the epoch where science is either is make or break, right? We're either going to make it or we're going to break it. And we're going into a dark age.
Right.
And so it'd be nice if we could preserve some of this priceless, it's a form of science for those who are to come the way it was preserved for us. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from that Instant Zen? That's a fun book.
Yeah, a couple other ones. There's one he talks about using the donkey. People are using the donkey looking for the donkey or riding.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, personally.
You
are the donkey. The world is the donkey. Yeah.
So one, I guess, kind of obvious message of that one is like using you're trying to find yourself, but you're looking for
foundational being,
right,
of awareness, while you are riding on the foundational being of awareness.
Right.
And then you are the foundational being of awareness. And now you won't get off, right?
Yeah. And so,
because it's important, we're here in this in a world where there's the manifest content and then there's the underlying content. And you must have both.
Mm-hmm. Is it kind of like the little mind is like the clouds in the sky, and the little mind is trying to find the foundational consciousness, but as long as it's trying, it's just more clouds. And
right, yeah, something like that, yeah, good.
And then the way to dissipate.
But on the other hand, for the human, if you don't see skies and a cloud and a tree, you're not looking correctly.
What do you mean?
Well, remember, this is a manifestation, the way that the foundational, and this is the hard part. This is why non-dual stuff trips a lot of people up. But the way that the essence appears the essence of the foundational being of awareness appears to the senses is as sense data, as trees and clouds and rivers and lakes. It's none other than that for the human on this planet. That's why, with the Buddha, he didn't close his eyes and go in a cave and sit there for 30 years. That would have been something totally different. And what he would have found would have been not right. Instead, he held up a flower, did he not? And so that's the part that people can't get until they wake up. It's not the absence of sense data, the absence of being, normally awake and alert, or normally breathing and walking around on the planet.
Right. Okay.
But it's not just that either. Not one, not two. And so here, now we're getting to the Zen, and this is where the problem as the Zenists focused on it. They focused on this aspect of the problem. But this is where that book, Instant Zen, could be useful. Look, if I could all of a sudden make creatures, like fantastic creatures, like a musketeer, with a sword and a big hat, and I could make it magically out of smoke. And you'd go, wow, that guy looks completely real. That's a real looking musketeer right here, full size. And I said, yes, but it's made of smoke. And I show you the smoke machine and all that. What would you say the musketeer was?
A projection?
Yeah, but he's also smoke.
Yeah.
Just smoke. Now, my eyebrows are aching and going to fall out at any moment for that crude metaphor. But it's something, so forgive me. I'm trying the best I can.
Okay.
So it's both smoke and the musketeer. And then if we could say it's neither smoke nor the musketeer, then we would be getting somewhere. So just take half of the metaphor, something like that.
Okay.
And forgive me. Those Zen guys, they really suffered too, man, let me tell you.
And then he has a passage where he says, when you're talking to the teacher, you do not see that there is a teacher. When you are eating a meal, you do not see that there's a meal there. Okay,
there you go. He doesn't mean that literally, like you can't see that there's a teacher there. You can't see that there's a meal there. Nobody's gone blind, right?
Right.
He's trying to point the student to something. But you can't be so literally, you can't be sophomoric about these exquisite texts, right? So, no, yes, so do you understand what I'm saying, right?
You can't.
I hope.
What?
Okay, he says, when you're talking to the teacher, you don't see a teacher there.
Yeah.
When you're eating a meal, you don't see a meal there. When you're reading from a sacred text, you don't see a sacred text there.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that the student is blind.
Right.
That doesn't mean the student cannot see what's immediately in front of his face. He can do that. But he can do more than that. Or less than that, depending on how you want to frame it. So, again, this is I don't know if I can take the pain in my eyebrows. They're falling out left and right. But with our smoke musketeer, it's not that you don't see a musketeer. You see a musketeer, right?
Yeah.
But there's no musketeer there.
Is it that you understand that there's no musketeer there?
Yes, your understanding is deeper.
I see.
And just like this world is a dream, it's a hallucination of the brain and some other things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know they love to talk about virtual reality now, but if they only knew, right? people have been talking about the same thing for 3,000 years, starting with the Indian Vedas or the Indian Atman, and so it's not like they're, oh boy, it's not that you can't recognize the obvious. It's that beyond the obvious, there's a reality, a truth, a deeper truth, a foundational being, which is awareness, which some people call consciousness with a capital C, and other people call something else. But none of the words do it justice. And when you can align with that instead of your selfish little ego or your trivial little desires for, status or money or pleasure or freedom from whatever, when you drop those and you can align with something else, something real, something not just permanent but eternal, something outside of time, then you will have lived a life worth living. And I'm not the only one who says this. And okay, let me answer your other question now. And as a matter of fact, even if all you do is search like a good Christian or a good Muslim or a good, a sincere woman or man who wants to get as close to God as she can.
Yeah.
That's the best you're going to do anyway. A man who loses his soul in this world has lost his life. So in any case, it's the only, like I say, the only game in town anyway. So one should do their best. And that if you're one-minded and focused about it, then maybe that's square meter of opportunity, when it arises, when you see that the door is open, you walk right through it. Something like that. Okay, sir, anything else before we stop?
Other thing, not a question, but last week we talked about using the AI to ask about Dharma stuff. I think you wondered if it would do like a visualization exercises.
I did? What? So what happened?
So I tested it out, and it took some prompting, because at first it like kind of tried to converge to just like mindfulness.
Yeah, you got to be real careful. My experience has been the following: that in science, it defers to consensus science, and in Dharma, it's no good. It's no good. It acts as if it could survey, 20 mindfulness books in the library.
Yeah.
No, I mean in the bookstore, and then it understands something, and it does not.
Yeah.
So, but it'll be a while. It'll be a while before.
But when I tried to press it on like going deeper, and
which AI?
The ChatGPT 4.0.
Okay. Not too shabby.
And as I pressed it got better as I pressed it.
It can get better. It can get worse.
Yeah.
I asked him to explain time. Einstein's famous quote. Time is a delusion, albeit a stubborn one. And it just blitzed out. It's just kind of like, well, the consensus science view is this. No. I said, yeah, I know the consensus science. This is something this guy said 100 years ago. And it just couldn't.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the problems with some of these AIs, is that it's, but I think Peter Thiel mentioned this in his video, or it might have been the interviewer that mentioned it. It was like, are you worried that the AIs are just going to converge to the average intelligence? And
what did he say?
He didn't really answer the question, I think.
Okay, yeah. I am. I'm worried it's going to do that. I mean, 3 has already done that.
I mean, I was going to say, I've already noticed this. It's the writing and the kind of like depth of conversation is very
not wanting to cause trouble for the corporation.
Yeah.
Well, but is it X working on a maximally truth-seeking AI?
So they say.
Yeah. Good luck. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I do wish them the best of luck.
Yeah.
We need that, but that's a tough one.
Yeah. I'm more excited about the open source AI because that one doesn't matter what anybody can just fine tune it to act the way it wants to. So if it's the current AI is like the 4.0, it's intelligent enough to talk about that stuff. It's just been like,
it's been browbeat by the consensus or something. I don't know what they did to that poor creature in the back room.
And so if that thing was like out in the open and people were able to make apps with it like they wanted to, then you'd have all sorts of.
Well, it's going to be interesting the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. So listen, before we stop, that book, Instant Zen, that you're reading, spend some more time with it. I think you'll find it. You're ready to get into some of the better stuff about it.
Okay. Yeah, I have it on Audible.
Okay, good. All right. Take good care, huh?
Thank you. You too.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.